Welcome to Daring to Suck. I'm your host, Grace Askew, a veteran musician, songwriter, recording artist, and road dog who has been living and breathing my craft for over 15 years. Each episode will dive deep into what it truly looks like to be a working artist, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Come roll along with me, tumbleweeds. Okay, cool. Well, welcome to episode 2 of Daring to Suck, a Grace Askew podcast. I'm your host, and today we have a very, very special guest, none other than Park Chisolm. He is a multi-instrumentalist, a producer, a songwriter, a touring guitarist. He's just a Renaissance man in every sense of the word, and I'm so honored to have him today on my show as the very first special guest ever. So thank you so much.
I'm honored to be asked to be here.
I immediately wanted to interview you when I came up with this podcast, for sure.
Well, I loved episode 1. I listened to it.
Oh, thank you.
Walking the dog the other day. I actually listened to it twice.
Really?
I just loved it. I think it's I don't know if you find this, but one thing I love about co-writing and collaborating with people is how quickly you just you jump past a lot of small talk and get to creating stuff. So it was like so much stuff. Even though we've worked together on a lot of stuff, there was so much in there I didn't know. I was like, oh, I never knew that chapter. I never knew that part of it.
That's what I'm hoping to uncover with you today, because I just want to pick your brain. After getting to know you as a producer and songwriter, I'm really interested in your backstory for sure. And to give a little backstory, Park and I met. It was the very first co-write that Demolition Publishing in Nashville assigned me to, basically. And I was 25 weeks pregnant at the time. And pregnancy brain is a real thing. I remember walking in to meet you, and my brain just blanked out on your name. I don't know if you noticed how I felt so awkward. I was like, hi. And then I went back to grab my guitar, and we started the co-write, and it was fine. But I just remember I was like, brain fog was real at the time. I was so pregnant. And but it was such a blast to write with you. And ever since our very first co-write, that has ended up on this upcoming album. So that just goes to show how just amazing it is to work with you, for sure.
Well, likewise, it was, I think we only hung out like an hour and a half that day. I think we wrote 2 songs.
2 songs, yeah.
Like super fast. And we're just like, yeah, that's
cool.
That's easy. That's fun.
Yeah, and then you sent the production on it, and I was like, holy shit, like this guy.
But that's the only time we've ever hung out in person.
Do what?
That's the only time we've ever hung out in person, too, was that hour.
I know. And then
hour and a half.
Mexico, and you're in Virginia. So what's the name of the town that you're in?
I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Okay. Very cool. And you
it's
do
really
the
close
hustle. You drive to Nashville a bunch, too, as well.
Yeah, I do. I haven't been back since, I think, February of this year. I was usually going at least a week every month. And then more, if I had something I needed to be down there for, I would just hop in the car. It's like 7.5 hours, which is, I don't know. I mean, I know you love the road. And also, I'm excited to talk to you about being an artist with a child now and how that's like, what's different. But I love, it almost feels like a, what do they call it in the submarines? Like the decompression chamber, like that 7.5 hours. Like I leave the house with my 2 kids and like life in full swing.
Your brain has room to breathe.
I get 7.5 hours of quiet just to, like, a lot of times I listen to no music. I just drive. And then I get the same thing coming back, because usually that week in Nashville is really intense. I just, book as many co-writes and work as much and as many hours as I can fit into the day. And then coming back, I kind of need that. I need that break too. Yeah,
no, I hear that. And I wanted to, we don't have to be as chronological as my own, artist journey was by any means, but I did want to kind of take it back to what is your earliest memory of being creative and feeling this connection to your creativity, or just maybe say music in general?
I always loved music. Nobody in my family played anything, so there wasn't I have friends that, grew up in really musical families and instruments around all the time. I remember being a really young kid, and my dad is actually super musical, but never like you can tell he just never really developed it. Like he's got a good singing voice, and he's actually like a self-taught he's a self-taught drummer.
Nice.
But the entire time I grew up, he had one like marching snare drum.
Yeah.
And he had one drumstick and a pencil, and so he would just every now and then he would pick it up and play. So there was not a lot of music around the house, but I always just loved it. And we would go to his house, the house he grew up in Tennessee, and he did have, he had a guitar as a kid, but he never learned how to play chords. He knew how to play the melody to On Top of Old Smoky, and I think that was it. But the guitar, was never in tune. Nobody knew what to do with it. And I would just I remember sitting in what I guess was his bedroom growing up with this guitar. I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I played left-handed, so I'm holding it backwards and the high string's on top. And I just remember plucking the string and turning the tuning pegs.
How old would you have been at this point?
I mean, maybe 5, 6,
Wow.
7, And I would just, I just thought it was so cool. You could do this thing, and then this string made this noise, and then eventually
Yeah.
I broke all the strings, and But the first, and then, so I was born in Tennessee, but grew up on a farm in Alabama, and nobody around really played much, and I remember being really interested in keyboards. Like I wanted, this was like 80s, and there was, you would walk through
Technology.
Walmart, and there were so many keyboards, and they all had little drum sounds on them, and I was like, man,
Yeah.
these are so cool.
You already had that producer mind because you could just produce.
Well, I think,
full-on
and then I
sounds.
think I got one of those, and for Christmas, and played around with it for a few days, and was like, this is hard, and it doesn't sound very good, and didn't do much with it. But when I was 11, I moved to Georgia, a little town called Noonan, Georgia, and there was a great Noonan it's like just a classic Southern town. They actually film a lot of movies there because it has just like an old court square,
Oh, cool.
a beautiful old courthouse, and really picturesque court square around it. And there was a pawn shop on the corner that, I mean, as a kid, being like 10 and 11 years old, you would go in there, and I mean, they sold everything from Chinese throwing star, like the old throwing stars and nunchucks,
Nunchucks,
to hunting equipment, to ski jackets, to whatever a pawn shop would have. But then they had a row of guitars, and I remember just going in there and just staring up at this wall of guitars and just thinking they were so cool. So my grandparents got me a really cheap acoustic guitar when I was 11, and I was thinking about this the other day. There was nobody in town that really taught guitar lessons. So my granddad it was a friend of his younger brother, who was probably 60 or 70 at the time, and he was just an old drunk living in a trailer on his brother's property, and he had gone to Nashville to be he wanted to be a songwriter and wanted to be a musician, and drank too much, and the breaks didn't happen for him, so he moved home and moved into this trailer, and he was just like this broken soul.
Wow.
But he could play and he could sing, so my mom would take me over there
No way.
on Sundays and drop me off at this trailer in the woods for 3 hours, and this dude, his daughter would come by and bring him sacks of pills. All this dawned on me later, this was not the best.
This is not the best environment.
No.
It sounds like something from an amazing biopic that needs to be made on your
Yeah.
life.
But he was a really sweet guy, and a really cool guitar player. I mean, he did kind of hybrid picking style guitar, so he was learn to play with your fingers, don't always use a pick. He had some interesting things. So anyway, I took from him, and
would you say
then
that you wanted to do music when you kind of met this first person who had this real connection with it, or when did you kind of find this true?
I don't think that. I mean, since nobody in my family did it, and they were all teachers, and my dad was a banker, and lawyers and stuff. It didn't seem like something that you really did. So I don't think that I ever really thought
It was a viable option.
No, I mean, I always loved doing it. I always was like, yeah, this is fun, you know,
Yeah.
and my family was really supportive.
Yeah.
But it just, I didn't think like, oh, this is a job that people do.
Right.
Um, the only person I knew that did it professionally, and this was a pretty big one, but my best friend growing up, I don't know if we've ever talked about him. He's a brilliant songwriter, musician. His name's Adam Wright.
Oh, okay. I think we
He
have.
lives in Nashville, and we grew up together, and taught each other, learned to play guitar together, and played in bands together all growing up. But his uncle is Alan Jackson, so
Oh, wow.
the massive country star. So as we're growing up, and we're learning, like, I don't know, whatever, like, it certainly was not Alan Jackson songs, but he was like, yeah, my uncle's is a country star, and we weren't really listening to country music, so it wasn't as impressive as whatever was on MTV at the time or whatever
Yeah.
we were into. And then later, as grown-ups, we were like, wow, this.
That's
But he was the only dude that we knew that was, that was it. So
Yeah.
it never felt like, a career path. So I mean, I went to college and I studied English.
Okay, I thought you went
Um,
to Vanderbilt for music.
No, again, I mean, I had, the music department at Vanderbilt is pretty formal. It's pretty, classically based. I mean, I had no.
Right.
I mean, I learned in a trailer in the woods. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So I took a couple of guitar classes while I was there, but I was an English major, and
Wow. Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think like if there was a theme early on, it was like, oh well, I like playing music, but real musicians are doing another thing, like they're in like I couldn't be in the music department at this school that I'm going to, and there's like people working at this as a job, but that didn't seem like a real thing. But I
Interesting.
just loved it, and I just kind of, I mean, I was always in bands, I was always playing around town, I was
Yeah.
always
Were
trying
you
to
the
figure
lead
out.
singer, or were you the guitarist in these bands?
Um, I was always more drawn to writing the songs, and I wouldn't say I was drawn to singing, but a lot of times by default, I would end up being the singer. But I always liked to have somebody in the band that was better than me at playing guitar,
Really?
for sure. Yeah, I didn't want, I didn't want that job per se.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, I really like, I'd never, and I think when I got into kind of backing other people up, or working with other people as part of their bands, when that, started to become like a job, I always approached it because I'd had experience, putting bands together and trying to, coordinate, I just tried to, well, how would I want somebody to, if they were in my
To
position,
sound.
how would I want somebody to handle this? How would I want them to approach the song, or how would I want
Right.
them,
Where
just
did you
tried to.
think? Yeah. Where did you find that ear for how a song should sound? Is it just from listening to a lot of different types of music? Because I feel like that might be something that a great producer would need, is like this like dictionary, so to speak, of all different instruments and.
Yeah, I guess, just listening to a lot of stuff. And then, I mean, I learned from a lot of really great people. And some of my earliest experiences in the studio were me going in to record my songs and just getting really good musicians around me.
Right. Okay.
And then that just kind of opened my
Nashville
eyes
has
to.
plenty of session players. Amazing
Yeah,
session players.
and I think that, some of it was like, I think even if I wasn't sure that I was going to be a professional musician, I loved being in Nashville, and I loved going out, to the bars and just watching these guitar players. And I mean, at the time, the only thing I played was guitar. So, watching these guitar players just, I mean,
Yeah.
do brilliant stuff for, 40 people in a bar on a Tuesday night, and just going, holy shit, the amount of
Yeah.
talent in that town. And the main guys, like, I loved, there's a guy named Will Kimbrough,
Yeah.
he's still like one of my, favorite guitar players. Kenny Vaughan was playing. Or do you know Kenny Vaughan?
I don't. I know Will though.
Man, Kenny. Yeah, I think Will's. He did a bunch of stuff in Memphis too. I think.
Yeah, isn't
I don't know
that Amy LaVere's husband? Isn't that right? No, am I thinking
that might be a different Will Kimbrough. This Will Kimbrough, he was in a band called the Biscuits a long time ago. He played with Todd Snyder, who was a Memphis dude.
Yeah.
When Todd first started, but he's a awesome. He makes beautiful solo records. But he was one of the first guys that I remember seeing in town and just thinking,
music out more now.
yeah, he's super cool. So I don't know, man. Just watching him, watching people play, and just going, they're like they just understood stuff. Like they understood like the pocket, like how you play in the pocket, and tone, like how And this stuff I didn't know anything about, so I just was like trying to soak it up from people who I knew a lot more stuff than me. So I would go in the studio, and be around these guys and just try to, just try to learn. There was another guy named Eric Fritsch that I met early on in Nashville who we recorded together a ton, and he was one of the first guys that that started to hire me to play on other people's stuff. And I mean, he kind of took me under his wing and taught me a ton about, just about all of it. So
yeah. Would you say on the writing side of your career, your English major helped at all, or? Because your writing always amazes
definitely.
me when you're like sending these rough demos of ideas. I'm like, how did he just come up with that this morning?
Well, you're sweet. That's for me. It's always that. It's always some people say they listen to music, but they never listen to lyrics. I mean, I'm always, and it doesn't have to. I don't need it to be. Dense, but there has to be, something about the lyrics that really, hold the whole thing together.
Yeah.
So I always, that was always, I mean, that was part of, I think in the back of my mind, part of why I wanted to be an English major was just to learn more about, words and learn more about writing and poetry and how people put things together and how.
I almost wish I had majored in English now.
Well, but you majored in, I mean, listen to I think a lot of the songwriters.
In Bar Life.
Yeah, but a lot of the songwriters you referenced.
I went to music. I went to college for music business, and was bored out of my
I should have
mind
done that
with
too.
The legalities of a lot of those classes, so dropped out. But I wish I'd stuck with just like you did with focusing on the writing side of things.
Yeah, I mean, and it's. I kind of think about, if at any point I had written what I wanted to be, I mean, this is true about life in general, but certainly if I had written what I wanted to be my story as a musician, it would have been a pretty narrow, it would have been I write songs, I go sing songs, and that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Luckily, that did not happen for me, and once I decided, all right, I think I got out of college and had a couple of jobs, and was just like, man, none of the there's no real safe career. I mean, I guess there's a few safe career paths, but an English major did not prepare me for any of those. So once I figured that out, I was like, well, if there's no sure thing, I might as well do this. But
yeah. So you were interested in pursuing music full time after you left college and got out of college?
Yeah, and I think originally, I wanted to be the guy writing the songs and singing the songs, and I just started getting gigs very casually, just sitting in with friends or backing up friends on instruments. And my wife Sarah bought me a bass, because I was like, oh, a bass would be fun to have. And then I just started telling people, hey, I'll play bass for you. I mean, I didn't know how to play bass.
Yeah.
I didn't have a bass amp, but I kind of thought, well, if I have a gig,
Yeah.
next Thursday, I'll certainly have to learn something between now and then. So,
Right.
um, yeah. So that the doors just kind of started opening in
And
those
then,
directions, and I was, I think, uh, aware enough to know that paying work in music is paying work in music, and I'm
yeah.
gonna follow where those doors open.
Yeah.
And
So
so your question
you
about
became
like how,
interested. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, your question about how, how the brain starts to, figure out how to put things together production wise.
Yeah.
I think there have been long periods where I've been really, really focused on guitar, electric guitar. Like maybe I'm on a tour with somebody and like all I'm thinking about is electric guitar and like what combination of guitars and amps and pedals or slides, like what's the combination that gives me the sounds I need to do
Yeah.
this. But that was a very narrow focus. And then there were a couple of years where all I played was bass. So all I'm thinking about is bass and bass
Gotcha.
tone, and and then at some point, you've kind of done enough little. I guess is how they make doctors go do residencies, and they're
Right.
no, you spend 6 months in a pediatrician's office and 6 months in a
Mm-hmm.
ear, nose, and throat, whatever. So I don't know, just all the little pieces of knowledge that I kind of picked up playing for other people, or kind of.
What is your production process like? Like when I sent you like a rough of me, my vocals and guitar, how do you do you have to kind of get in this zone and kind of listen to the rough over and over? I'm just so curious in how your brain works when you start forming, like painting the picture of what you
Yeah,
hear.
I mean, yours, working on, and they're all a little bit different, but your project was so relatively easy because, I mean, the vocal was always badass and the guitar was always, I mean, it was already there, so it's, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times it's like build this thing from scratch. So you got to figure out like, I mean, for me, I'm always looking for like, what's the heartbeat of the thing? Like, what's the main thing that
Right.
everything else is in service of? And for you, like it was already there. Like your guitar playing and your singing are such one thing, and they're so unique. That it was like, well, everything's just got to be, in service of that. So with yours, usually, I would kind of start from the ground up and go, all right, are there drums in this? What are the, what's the flavor of those? Like
Yeah.
what's their function? Does it need to feel like a drummer at a kit, or does it need to feel more like just random stuff that you're banging? Is it just like accent? And a lot of times for me, because I'm not a drummer at all, it ends up being a combination of all those. It's like
Yeah.
there's some like steady like kit elements, but even those might be a little weird. They wouldn't, and then it's a lot of just kind of percussive, banging on stuff, and
Yeah.
and then kind of once that's there, then it's what are the interesting flavors that kind of, again, are in service to the main thing and are helping to tell the story, and maybe pulling out, a flavor of what the story is or where the story's set, or
Yeah.
really they're just reacting to how you're playing and how you're singing, and where are the spaces that,
I like that.
where
That's a
where
good
are
way
the
to put it.
spaces, and sometimes those spaces need to stay there, and then sometimes they, a little, I think of it like, once you get the canoe going down the river, a lot of times all you got to do is, just put your paddle in occasionally. Like you don't have to do a lot of
Yeah.
work, and so, if you can get it to that point where structurally it's all there, and the main thing is doing its job, then everything else can just be, you know,
Just more fluid.
yeah, more fluid and kind of accent. And it can also, the more you hold that stuff back, the more impactful it is when you bring it in.
Yeah.
I like to I don't know. Your project was really fun because I feel like we had a lot of. I feel like we ended up with a lot of really stripped down moments that then when other things happened, you know, they could be really impactful.
Right.
Usually
Yeah.
if I feel stuck on something, it's just because I'm tired and it's, you know, I need to just kind of get away from it for a little bit.
Right.
But I think, you know, one thing that helps me as a producer is I just kind of keep moving forward. Um, I feel like I see people that, you know, they'll kind of get unsure about something and then they'll double back and they'll kind of redo it and then they'll have,
Overthink.
you know, six different, and I certainly do a lot of, you know, I come at it from a lot of different ways, but I don't, I feel like I have a, for some reason my brain is okay with not knowing and is okay with, well, let's move forward and it'll, you know, it'll work itself out
You
somehow.
really do
We'll know.
seem to have, yeah, I was actually, I have that in my notes about you, is you seem to have this really sense of abundance in your mindset. And we've spoken about this before on the phone. Because the music industry kind of, it's built upon a little bit of a scarcity mindset where we need them. We need, you know, the gateway men to kind of get to where we need to go. But as a producer and as a songwriter, you seem to have this like Zen Master kind of, I don't know, mindset to you that's just, we'll make more music, you know, the music will always be there. There will always be more songs you can push through. I've just kind of gotten that from you. And
Well,
how do you kind of, how did you build that mindset? Or do you think it's just kind of your personality or?
I think it's a little bit my personality, and I think also, um, and I very much connected. You know, when you talked about your year, where you said I'm doing this every day for a year, it's almost like you kind of get a little blue collar with it and go, well, this is my job. This is what I do. I get up and I do this.
Yeah.
Um, and I've there's a have you ever read that Stephen King book on writing?
I haven't. I have it on my bookshelf and I have not even
Man,
finished
it
it
is
yet.
awesome. I recommend it to every writer or really creative person because I think, you know, he has a very just blue
Discipline.
collar approach to it. Like you just do it, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that, you know, the only time that I get, you know, kind of itchy in life is when I'm not just showing up and kind of working on it a little bit. Because what I've found is that if I can, you know, and for me it's usually early morning. You know,
Yeah, same.
if I can just like carve out the time
You're
and
fresh
just
minded.
sit and just like let my brain, you know, kind of have a little free time and just sit with a, you know, and usually I'm not sitting with a guitar. Usually I'm just sitting with a laptop and I'm just like, I'm just looking for words, you know, just like just a feeling. And I feel like, you know, the more blue collar you've been about actually building songs and putting songs together and what rhymes with what and
Yeah.
is that a good way to end that verse? Does that chorus have like the more you've done that, then you know how to do that. Then you really just need like you just got to have the inspiration.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, so I don't know. Maybe I should worry about it a little more, but I just kind of feel like if I'm making the time and finding ways to
Yeah.
keep my brain fresh and keep myself excited, and sometimes that means I'm a little tired of playing guitar. I'm putting that down. I'm just gonna do it all on, you know, weird synthesizer pads
Exactly. I get
or
burnt
like
out on
an old
guitar too.
piano or like or sometimes just not even like, you know, not even use an instrument, but just
Mm-hmm.
find ways to make it, you know, make it feel fresh and you know, and then just seek out other art that's moving, you
There was
know,
a
other.
lot of questions from people kind of questioning my daily songwriting challenge in quality over quantity. And it was never about that. And I'm sure you understand that. It's not about every single day being a quality song. It's just about going through the mechanisms of writing a
Yeah.
song. It's going through the process of getting comfortable with it.
Yeah, man.
It's not about every day being this fluid, formulaic, bit of perfection. So I love that you said it's kind of a blue collar job. That's a really good way to put it.
I just think it's not for everybody. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
some people, and I'm always amazed when I hear people say, and usually it's artists who are, they'll write for an album. Maybe they write, 15, 20 songs, and then they pick the best, 9, 10, 11, and then they don't write for a couple of years, and then they'll do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, that's brilliant, but I'm sure that those people are finding other ways to keep their creativity stoked.
Totally.
And they're finding other outlets for it, so that when they do, turn their attention to the task of writing songs, they don't have to just turn the spigot on. The spigot's already been on. They just got to move it.
Lucinda Williams talked about that in this recent interview in Cowboys and Indians magazine, how she has that same process where she won't really write for years, but she's like, songwriters are always working, whether we realize it or not, because we're observing the world around us and kind of taking mental notes, or actually writing a note about something interesting you heard in a booth, in the diner or something. But it is true, we're ideal workers, so what we do isn't tangible. You can't see that we're working, but we always are naturally kind of more observant kind of people. You certainly seem like an observant kind of person, which helps, for sure.
I think I am, but I also think that I have to, I think that I do have to apply a little bit of discipline to it and make myself, I don't know that because there have been years, when I was on the road playing with other people, where I wasn't writing at all.
Yeah.
And I just, once I had the opportunity, and really it was, when I joined Kevin's band and was able to kind of let some other things go.
That's
and
Kevin Costner, by the way, for our listeners.
Yeah,
I didn't mention that
and
before.
really just kind of buckle down. And he was such a gracious band leader, welcoming me into that fold and saying, I was used to being a sideman in a band where you kind of, you get the music and you go, okay, cool, this is my little, this is what I do, this is my job on the assembly line, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I took a lot of pride in trying to do that really well, and trying to, always show up and be on for those moments. But man, there was something like, it's like the skies opened up when I played like 2 gigs with him, and had very much approached it like a sideman, like, okay, I know all your songs, I've learned the harmony parts, I'm ready for the show. And I, showed up at his house for the first rehearsal, and we're like sprawled out around his house, and it's as much like a high school band as anything I've ever done. And
Is that in Montana or something, or where is that?
No, that was out in California.
Oh,
he has a
okay.
place in Aspen too, but this was at his California house, and I
Okay.
was just like, oh my God, this is like the joy of being in a band and like creating. And then when he said, hey, if you got any songs you think would be good for the band, I was just
amazing.
like, first of all, who says that?
Right.
And then he didn't know me from anybody. But I think I was so grateful to have just that little sliver of light, because I knew, I wasn't really interested in making records for myself. I just needed like an outlet. I needed like a little sliver of like, oh, well, this is where these can go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that just kind of, that kind of cracked it open for me. And then I kind of, dove back into writing, as much as I could. And
How many years were you on the road with as his guitarist in his band?
I'm gonna say, it's been like 12 or 13 years probably.
Wow.
That. Yeah, it's been a long time. And we, when I first started playing with him, I'll never forget. I had a good friend who was playing with him, and the band was in its really early stages, and they had decided that they wanted a second electric guitar player who could sing high harmonies. And this is my buddy Teddy Morgan, who's another guy that, I mean, the amount of stuff that I've learned from him in studio and about guitar and just about music, and continue to learn from him, it just keeps going. But he and I'd worked together a bunch, and he was in the band, and he said, hey, can you come out and do this gig? And the band that I was touring with at the time was, we had a little break, and so I went out and did the gig, and it was so much fun, and came back, and I remember John Coinman, another guy in the band who was one of Kevin's best friends for 30 years, called, that the next Monday, and he said, man, that went great. We loved, having you out here. You did so great. We'd love to have you on, on all the shows we're doing. And I was like, oh, cool. This is a new gig. I was like, yeah, what's happening? He goes, oh, well, we don't have any gigs, but if we have any, we'd love for you to do them. And I was like, so is that like a job offer? Like, what is that? And he was like, no, we'll just, we'll call if we get any gigs. But it was so much fun. And it seemed like such a different, I was really, at that time, was really functioning in the kind of Music Row machinery of, the touring band, out on the bus playing, and then the artist comes back and writes the songs with other people, and then goes in the studio with the session band, which is different than the touring band. So, I'd kind of gotten in this mentality of, all right, well, this is kind of where I fit. So, his situation was so different that I was like, man, I'm going to quit this other gig. Kevin has no gigs. Maybe it'll turn into something, maybe it won't, but I think I'd be mad if I didn't at least follow this really interesting thing that he and the band were creating. So anyway, I quit, and we got a bunch of gigs, and for a couple of years we toured. We toured Europe a bunch and toured the States a bunch, and we've always, there've been really busy years, and then there've been years where we'll do 15 or 20 shows, but we're always, I write with a couple of those guys, every week or every other week, and when Kevin gets really busy with movies, and TV stuff, it's great because he's very gracious, and he'll send us a script and go, hey, you guys should, let's try to write something for this, or you guys, if you got any songs that fit this. So it's, just an amazing, any way that I'd written the story would have never, there's no version of it that would have ended, that would have resulted in my being, a guitar player in his band and writing songs. That just, like, my imagination is not that good. So I'm glad that as doors opened, I was smart enough to kind of stumble through them.
What an experience too, just the budget level of something like a production like that. I would just love to, just to see the mechanisms of touring with a full-on band, going to Europe.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We have pretty much done it all kind of as an independent band. The first record we put out was on Universal South, or they distributed it, but it's always been, something that has, it's just like a little independent band that it just kind of chugs along, and it's always been, it's never been, I hate even the term vanity project, because I don't even know what that would mean, but Kevin's band has always been a working band that has been has every tour had to end up in the black. We're all like, it's got to make sense. It's like it's got to be a business that the numbers make sense at the end of the day. So so it's always, I think
that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, I've always been, it's never been like, oh, well, Kevin's gonna kind of pay for us all to go do this thing. It's
that's
like,
what
no.
I kind of assumed about it, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's an easy assumption and a common assumption, and maybe, other bands work that way. But this one's always been like, no, we got these offers for dates. So here's a budget we got.
Here's
How are
the
we getting
route.
there? Yeah, here's what we're going to do. Can we take, we're going to do one bus? Can we do two buses? Do we need to like fly some people there and some people take a van there? It's just like, it's very, I just like it that it actually, is actually a good little, business,
Yeah. So you were touring for 12 or 13 years on and off, but in that time, when did you start getting your interest in being a producer and kind of forming relationships with other artists who were interested in you producing them?
Honestly, I think I just got to, and I wonder if you had the same experience. I just got kind of tired and antsy with always having to have other people do it for me.
Yep.
And
because you probably could hear in your own head what you wanted.
Well, but at the time I got into it, I'd had, a decent amount of experience being in the studio and playing on other people's things, but always again as like, this is my role in the studio. I'm hired on this one as the guitar player, hired on this one as the bass player. Sometimes there's some overlap, but and I always loved being in there, but I really, for the longest time, I wasn't interested in being the person that was putting it all together. I mean, even though I'd been kind of thinking that way. Well, this is how guitar can fit into this. This is how bass can. This is how harmonies. Like I was working on all the pieces, but it just seemed like a lot of work, man. Like mixing and recording, and then you got to get the right mics, and then you got to figure out how to make them sound good. And it just seemed like the learning curve was so steep, and I wasn't afraid of work, but I just knew the amount of time that it was going to take to actually get good at it
it's overwhelming.
Was a lot. So we had a year with Kevin where we did a couple of months in Europe, like right at the beginning of the year. We might have been over there 2 months, maybe 3 months, I can't remember, but we got back and I just had like a stretch of time.
Yeah.
And normally when I would get back, I would kind of put some feelers out and, hey, like, anybody, let's go do some gigs, like try to find some work.
Right.
And this year I was like, man, I'm just gonna hunker down and try to figure out how to, all I wanted to do was like, I just need some basic like,
gear.
can I record a good vocal sound and a good acoustic guitar sound, and maybe, I'd heard the loops. I had no idea how to make one. Like, can I just get that? And like, how do you get reverb on a vocal?
Yeah.
And then how do you get it from the computer out of the computer into like, just the basic stuff. And my wife, Sarah Beck is her name, and she's an awesome human first off, but just an awesome songwriter and musician, and really fearless about jumping into stuff that she doesn't really know how to do. She's so in her own genes right now for the first time, and but she had been playing around with GarageBand a lot, and I think it was certainly was a collaborative thing where we were like, man, we gotta figure out how to do this. So we got a little bit of gear, and I leaned on a lot of people. Teddy, I'm surprised he still answers his phone as much as I called him and asked him stuff. And Eric Fritsch, the other guy I mentioned, I leaned on him. Just people that I'd worked with. I was just like, so how did you do that thing that did this? And I love that community aspect of it, where they just were so freely just were like, oh, here's how you do it. Here's here's exactly the thing I did to get that.
I love it.
Never proprietary about any, never guarding any tricks, or just like, no, here's how you do that.
Nashville is definitely more open, like a more open community I've found than than a lot of towns. I'm not going to name names, what town, but
I think
yeah,
so, man. I've certainly had that experience that people like, they can't wait to talk about really cool stuff they've figured out.
yeah,
And then it's up to each person. I mean, you just because they told me the kind of mic that would be a good mic, or here's a cool reverb, or here's a trick to do this.
yeah,
That doesn't mean I'm going to be any good at it. It's I mean, it's still up to the
exactly.
person to kind of figure out how to. So anyway, so Sarah and I, we kind of hunkered down with Pro Tools and just started to figure it out. And
Had you found a space, or did you kind of find a space in
no,
your house, or?
yeah, we just like in a room. At the time we were living in a little 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom house over in East Nashville with 3, sometimes 4 dogs. We didn't have any kids yet, so
So much
yeah,
free time.
so much free time. Yeah, so we just like took one of the bedrooms and just set up in there, and it just started making some really bad sounding shit.
Gotta start
But again,
somewhere. You
like,
gotta dare to suck.
but again, like, and anybody who like asks me, like, how do you, like when friends, songwriting friends are like, what do I need to get? What do I need to do? And I'm like, man, don't even think about what it's going to sound like at the end of the day. Like, be excited that you even got the mic to work. Like, it has to be like the smallest building block. So like, yeah, that mic worked.
Right.
Now, how do I make it sound better? Now, how do I make, and you just kind of build off that stuff. So we just kind of hold up with it, and
Yeah.
and actually one of my favorite things we've done is we made, I guess this would have been, well, it would have been 9 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. No, 9, because Sarah was pregnant with our first daughter who just turned 8.
Oh wow.
We had since moved into another house, and we had gotten pretty good at making demos and little recordings, and Sarah wanted to make kind of an acoustic album. And it's one of my favorite things that we've done together. We were, in this new house and just tucked away in one of the bedrooms, and she's like, 7 months pregnant, trying to sing, and she's like, I can't sing, I can't breathe. Yeah, so like the whole thing, like, she listens back to it now and is aware of like how quietly she was singing because she couldn't get a full breath, and it's
What's the name of that album?
It's called A Simple Thing.
A Simple Thing. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a really, really fun early recording that we did together, and that we brought like there's a guy named David Henry who's a really great cello player. I mean, he does a ton of great stuff.
Oh,
But
that's one of my favorites.
we like brought him over to the house, and the other thing, like when I started recording people, like I don't know where to put the microphone on a cello.
Right. That's how I felt. Yeah,
But I knew
my last record.
David did, so I said, "Hey, come over," and then I'd just like put him in the room, and I'd put the microphone in there and just kind of walk away, and then he'd like put it exactly where it went,
You're
and I'd go
much
back and look
braver
up.
than me. I had to
That's
get
where
an
it goes.
engineer friend during my Denim and Diesel record. I just cut in our creaky old house in Eads, and just produced it myself. But I had that same experience. But I just got my engineer friend to like set it up for me and kind of watch, because I'm such a visual learner. I had to like watch him do it so I could learn how to do it. But yeah, it's so daunting in the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like still to this day, because I know, those guys know,
Yeah.
that they know their instruments, they know what microphones they like, they know where they like the microphones. So I like, if it's somebody that I love their sound and I love the way they play, I'm like, here it is. I know if you're playing violin, I know it kind of goes up here, and then you can go where you like it,
Yeah.
and they'll find the spot.
Yeah. I just want to kind of touch on, what is your perspective on the current state of the music industry right now with COVID happening, and how do you
Oh my gosh.
cope? I mean, I know you stay busy with writing and producing and but what's kind of your mental state right now with things?
I mean, it's weird. I said as a joke early on when everything went into lockdown, I said, man, I kind of feel like I've been preparing for this moment for 20 years. So basically I just like stay in my basement in the studio and
It's like
go
your
up
dream
every now and then for fresh
situation.
air. I'm like, that's kind of what I was doing anyway.
I know. That's kind of how we
So
felt because
I
Wolf
have
was
found it.
born the day the quarantine was announced. So it was kind of like we'd be hunkered down anyways.
Yeah, you're like, cool. So I stay home with my baby and
Right.
hang out. And yeah, I mean, so that part of it was totally fine. I've missed the energy of going to Nashville and being in a room with people. And I think, collaborating with people on recordings. I mean, since we've been locked down, it's kind of like, um, I luckily, Sarah is a musician, so
Yeah.
so there are, is another really good musician in the house that
That's,
we can.
yeah. That's got to be amazing.
But I miss, I miss kind of hanging out with people. But man, I've loved. I don't know. I've kind of loved the Zoom writing, and
Yeah.
I think some people have hated it, but it's been. I mean, there's certain things you can't do, like you can't get in a room and just kind of, vibe. I mean, you can't play along with somebody. It's kind of like, it requires you to listen in a different way.
Totally.
I think maybe early on it required a little more of coming with an idea that was maybe a little further down the road than it would need to be if it were just two people in a room, because I think the energy of being in the room would kind of move something along a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even that, I don't think I'm doing that as much anymore. So, and honestly, I don't know if you had. I think I was really excited about. I mean, we had been in Nashville for 20-something years. I was excited about leaving, and I think I needed a change of scenery, and
Yeah.
I just needed a little more room for my brain to work
I hear
in
you.
isolation. But I was definitely nervous about, how do I stay connected with this community that that I love and that I've spent, a long time building.
Yeah. I just worry about, I don't know if you do, but just the venues themselves. I don't know how we'll go back to a state of normalcy.
Yeah. Who knows, man? I mean, I don't, it's just hard to peek into the future at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, probably, unfortunately, what's going to happen is a lot of venues will close.
Yeah.
Um, if and when we're on the other side of a pandemic, I imagine that those spaces will get filled with new venues, or maybe the old people. I mean, it'll, there will be I just think that, if and when it's safe to do so, I think people are always going to want to find places to gather and listen to
Right.
music, and I think I think that'll all be fine.
Yeah.
I hope anyway,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that performing live was and I'd love to hear how you feel about this. I don't know, but performing live maybe wasn't my favorite aspect of being a musician. I definitely am finding so much enjoyment in these collaborations and recording and getting more into that life, more so than focusing on
Yeah.
the stage,
Yeah,
life.
I'm probably the same way. I like it. I enjoy it, when I do it, but I certainly don't crave it.
Right. I crave the
I kind of,
travel, but maybe not.
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I crave a little bit of the, the getting to wander a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I haven't missed that part of it. I mean, really, it's kind of made it easier for me to collaborate with people, because I think before we were all working under the assumption that we needed to be in a room together. So I was going,
Right.
all right, well, here's this week. If we can't find any time in that week, then we'll try next month or whatever. And now it's, nobody knows where anybody is. We're all just on a computer screen. So it's really kind of made it, I don't know, it's made it easier to connect with people
accessible.
that,
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Um,
actually liking the virtual co-writes too. It's not as bad
yeah,
as I thought it would be.
and I think some people just it just does not work for them, and I totally get that. But yeah, I don't know. Um, I've kind of enjoyed them.
Yeah. Well, shameless plug. Park and I have our next single coming out next Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, so Black Friday.
Oh yes.
For your shopping, you have a wonderful new Southwestern Christmas song to listen to. It's called Red Dirt Christmas. We had a
Oh
lot of
my
fun
God,
writing that
I
one. I
love it.
did.
You know, and I just love when you reached out and said, I think I want to write a Christmas song. It was just like, what kind of Christmas song are we gonna write?
I
You know,
know.
but like, how are we even gonna? They're so. It's like, how do you even approach that?
It's daunting. At first, it was.
Yeah, but I love again, like once we found the thing,
Yeah. It was
I
so
feel like
worth that initial overwhelm to
yeah,
push through and come
and
up
then
with Red Dirt.
it just kind of unfolded, and it was so much fun, and it's
Hmm.
like it's so I don't know, it just feels like it's so you, and it feels so like uh, I just love it. I love being a part of it, and I love how the recording turned out. I'm very
Yes.
excited
Yes,
for it.
I'm so excited too. And the full EP that Park and I just did from a distance during COVID is dropping February, I believe, 21st or 26th, the end of February, 2021. So I'm really excited for that to come out as well. And we're calling
Do
it
I hear
Desert
somebody in the
Noir or
background?
Southwestern Gothic, which I think you definitely coined Desert Noir. I love that description.
You know, I think I probably heard that. John Coinman is a guy in Kevin's band, and he lives out in Tucson. There's a couple of guys in his band that live in Tucson. I feel like he probably said that about something at some point, and it just made sense.
Yeah.
But it definitely your whole vibe and everything. It was just like that's it.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense to me. Um, I wanted to finish out just with a question on, again, going back to you being a producer, despite you being a fantastic songwriter. I'm just curious personally, if you had one big piece of advice to artists wanting to get into producing, what would it be, would you say?
Um, I just do it. I mean, I really I think
Yeah.
that it can feel so daunting, and just find your you know find the thing that makes you excited about it, and do it, and don't be afraid of doing it wrong. I think for a long time, because I was around so many people who were really really good at it,
Yeah.
I was like, you know,
Who am I?
I knew well I knew what the bar was, and I knew how far away I was from it. So I think I probably dragged my feet in that learning process. So I think just do it, and don't be afraid to do it wrong, because sometimes that's how the
That's what we're
best
all
mistakes
about here
happen.
on Daring to Suck.
Yeah, man, and and play it for people, and find people who know stuff that you don't know, and ask them questions, and you know,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I
but
think
definitely dare to suck.
hmm?
I said definitely dare to suck.
Yes, yes. It's
Definitely do
always
that.
worth it. That initial uncomfortability is just it's it's something that you had kind of I like to say artists their job is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable
Yeah,
because we deal so much with the intangible and just creating something from nothing all the time. So that's kind of part of the job description.
yeah,
So
very much.
cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and
Thank
your
you.
wisdom, and I just can't wait for people to hear the rest of our project for sure, and to hear more
I
music from
can't
you in
wait,
general.
man. I can't wait. Sarah and I listened to we listened to Coyote Love last night. We had a fire going, and we were just kind of listening to some music, and I
Yeah,
pulled that up, and I'm excited.
me too.
So
I
glad
think
that so
"Find
glad.
You" is my new favorite. I think it's been my favorite for a long time, but it's the song that you brought to the table. You had come up with the idea, the first lyric,
Oh yeah.
and then you, me, and Olivia Rudine
Mm-hmm.
sat down and kind of we all sussed out the rest of it, and I think that's the next single for January to drop. So I
cool.
love it.
Well, let's do more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Where can we find more about you? You've got an Instagram, Park Chisolm.
Yeah, but I'm so bad at it. I'm kind of like a Instagram voice. I mean, I don't know, man. I know I should make peace with social media, but I'd like.
No, I hear you.
I kind of look at it like once a day, and I hardly ever post anything. I'm certain I will be posting next Friday about our Christmas song.
Right on. I appreciate that.
Thank you.